When Ella's beloved grandmother passed, she thought her hardest days were behind her. But nothing could prepare her for the betrayal that followed, a betrayal that would cut deeper than grief ever could. Left out, written off, and erased from the family legacy she'd devoted years to protect, Ella was forced to watch as everything she'd loved was ripped away. But in the shadows of heartbreak, she quietly began a plan that would turn the tables in a way no one saw coming. What happens when the quiet one finally stands up and delivers justice colder than winter? Click to hear Ella's story of loss, revenge, and the true meaning of home. I always knew Grandma's house would be mine someday. Not because I felt entitled to it, but because she told me again and again, in quiet, meaningful moments that made it clear I wasn't just imagining things. "This place has always been yours, Ella," she'd whisper as we sat on the porch watching fireflies dance through the dusk. "You're the only one who ever loved it like I do." When I left my job in the city to move back to our little rural town and care for her after her stroke, I didn't do it for the house or the money. I did it because she was the only person in our family who had ever made me feel seen. Mom and Dad called it a phase. My brother Josh said I was throwing my life away. I was a high school English teacher, single, with no kids, and to them, that meant disposable. Replaceable. But Grandma, she'd tuck her hand into mine when I brought her tea or helped her dress. She'd tell me stories of her own youth, of the war, of the gardens she grew with her bare hands. And she'd remind me, over and over, "Don't let anyone tell you what your worth is, Ella. You define that." We made that house a home again in those final years. I cooked, she critiqued. I planted sunflowers, she beamed. I fixed creaky floorboards and repainted walls. She said I made the house feel young again. She didn't have much in terms of cash. But the house sat on 5 acres of beautiful land, and every inch of it held our shared memories. It was priceless to me. So when Grandma passed, just shy of 92, I was devastated. I stayed with her the whole night before, holding her hand as her breathing slowed. The last words she managed were, "It's yours, baby. The house. Don't let them," and then she was gone. The funeral was modest. I handled the arrangements because, of course, no one else had planned ahead. Josh showed up late with his new fiancée. My parents cried for appearances but didn't speak to me much. Still, I wasn't prepared for what came next. A week after the service, I went to the courthouse to check on the will. The clerk looked at me, confused. "You're not listed here," she said. The estate passed to her next of kin. The property was sold. What? I blinked. Sold to who? She gave me a name I didn't recognize. A local investor. My stomach dropped. I drove straight to the farmhouse, heart pounding. I found my parents and Josh inside, sipping coffee like they owned the place. Renovations were already underway. "We thought it was best," Dad said. "You've got your little teacher life. You didn't really need it." Josh chimed in, "Yeah, we needed the money more." "You'll be fine, Elle." I stood there, staring at them in disbelief. She promised it to me. I took care of her. She didn't put it in writing, Mom said, coldly. So don't be dramatic. They sold the house. They forged signatures. They split the inheritance 3 ways. And they left me with nothing. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe the will had gotten lost. Maybe the clerk at the courthouse had been wrong. But no. My family had done exactly what it looked like they'd done. I found out later they'd had Grandma update her will months before she died. My name was removed entirely. Josh, Dad, and Mom had taken turns driving her to appointments, claiming they were helping her get her affairs in order. I was busy at the house, nursing her, helping her with the bathroom, managing her medications, never suspecting they were plotting to erase me. They'd waited until she was slipping. Until she was tired and confused enough to trust whatever papers they put in front of her. And they'd timed everything so that the sale went through just days after the funeral. Quick. Clean. No room for protest. I wasn't even angry at first. Just numb. Like the wind had been knocked out of me and all I could do was sit there and try to breathe. I walked the perimeter of the farmhouse that night. The wraparound porch where Grandma and I had spent evenings watching storms roll in. The kitchen window where the smell of cinnamon rolls used to spill out every Sunday morning. The rose bushes I had replanted after the frost killed them years ago. Now it wasn't mine. Now it never had been. When I saw the new for sale sign taken down in Josh's car in the driveway, reality sank in deeper. They hadn't just taken the house. They were living in it. My parents had moved in temporarily, they said. Josh and his fiancée had already picked out their future nursery. The place had become their golden prize. They were going to make a home out of Grandma's legacy and pretend like I'd never been a part of it. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream or cry or throw things, though part of me wanted to. Instead, I drove away. I stayed at a friend's place for a while. Cried into her pillow when she was at work. Drank tea that didn't taste like home. The betrayal sat in my chest like wet concrete. And that's when something started to shift. See, when you grow up being the quiet one, the nice one, people forget you're capable of more. My family had written me off because I didn't make waves. Because I was a teacher with a modest apartment and a used Honda. Because I didn't chase money or titles or brag at holiday dinners. But what they never understood was that I was never weak. I was just patient. And now, they'd given me a reason to stop being patient. I started digging. Not in anger, but in purpose. I went through the town's property records. Tracked the investor they'd sold the house to. His name was Mitchell Carter, and he owned a dozen properties in the county, most of them underperforming. 2 were in foreclosure. He was trying to liquidate assets to cover debt. Fast. Interesting. I also learned that the rent-to-own deal my family had signed was flimsy at best. Mitchell still technically owned the house. And if he sold it again, they'd have no legal claim to stay. No warning. No second chances. I sat on that knowledge for a few days. Let it breathe. Let myself imagine what it would feel like to take back what was mine, not through yelling or begging, but through action. Grandma used to say, "Don't fight fire with fire. Fight it with water and make sure it's ice cold." So I smiled to myself and started planning. The first step was figuring out my finances. I didn't have much. Teaching isn't exactly a goldmine, but I wasn't broke either. Grandma may not have left me anything in her will, but my paternal grandfather had. A modest inheritance I'd never touched, sitting in an account under my name since I was 18. I'd always thought I'd use it for grad school, or maybe a down payment someday. But this? This was bigger than any dream I'd had before. I met with a financial advisor I trusted, someone outside our small town, someone with no ties to my family, and explained what I wanted to do. I told him I was interested in purchasing rural property under a holding company, to keep the transaction anonymous. He didn't ask why. He just told me how. With my inheritance and a small business loan, I had enough. Barely. The paperwork was a mountain, but I climbed it. LLC formation, property registration, bank routing setups. Every signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on my family through quiet channels. Mutual acquaintances. Facebook updates. Casual mentions from people at the grocery store who had no idea what had happened. Josh and his fiancée, Courtney, had thrown an engagement party at the house. My parents were doing light renovations. They'd even repainted the kitchen and were talking about building a deck out back. They referred to it as our family estate on social media. It was like I'd been erased entirely from the narrative. But none of them had checked the county's online property database. They didn't know Mitchell Carter was drowning in debt. They didn't know he'd reached out to his network quietly, hoping to offload 3 homes, including Grandma's, before the end of the quarter. And they certainly didn't know that the buyer making an all-cash offer was their own daughter and sister. When Mitchell and I finally met in person, I wore my best blazer and kept my tone neutral. We met at a neutral location in the next county over. "You run a holding company?" he asked, skeptical. Yes, I replied. Focused on historic properties, restoration and repurposing, community enrichment. He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. I think the money spoke louder than my credentials. After the deal closed, I walked out of his office with the deed in my bag and a fire in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not rage. Not even satisfaction. It was power. Pure, clean power. I didn't rush things. That was the hardest part, waiting. Keeping quiet while they posted progress updates on their renovations. While Mom bragged to her church friends about how things finally worked out. While Josh and Courtney picked baby names and planned to convert the old guest room into a nursery. 3 months passed. The renovations were nearly done. They'd moved in full time, sold their old homes, planted roots. And then, right on schedule, I sent the notice. A legal, airtight letter from my lawyer. Effective in 30 days, the current occupants must vacate the premises. The new owner intends to reclaim the property for personal use. The panic spread quickly. I watched it unfold in real time through social media hints and whispers from the community. Josh ranted about some heartless corporate takeover. Mom posted cryptic Bible verses about betrayal. Dad tried to contact Mitchell, only to find his number disconnected. And then moving day arrived. I pulled up in front of the farmhouse with the deed in my hand and my name on every line. They didn't see me at first. I parked behind the tree line, just past the gravel bend in the driveway, and watched as chaos unfolded on the front porch. Boxes half packed. Trash bags piled by the steps. Courtney sobbing into her sleeve. My brother pacing in circles, phone glued to his ear. My parents stood off to the side, stiff and silent. My mother had her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was trying to hold herself together. Dad just kept shaking his head like it had all been a dream, some clerical error that would fix itself if he scowled hard enough. I waited 10 minutes. Long enough to let the tension marinate. Then I stepped out of the car, calm and deliberate, and started walking toward the house. Courtney was the first to notice. Her eyes widened as she pointed. Is that? Josh turned, then froze like he'd seen a ghost. Ella? Dad's face drained of color. Mom didn't even blink. I walked up the front steps, each one echoing beneath my feet, and stopped in the middle of the porch, the same spot Grandma and I used to sit with iced tea on warm evenings. Hey, I said simply. Josh's mouth opened, then closed. What are you doing here? I held up the manila envelope in my hands, thick and unmistakable. Just came to check on the property. Mom finally spoke. What property? This one, I replied, setting the envelope down on the porch swing. I'm the new owner. No, Josh said. No, Mitchell sold it. This is a mistake. Mitchell sold it, yes. To me. Through a holding company I set up. I looked around at all of them, eyes sharp but steady. I'm reclaiming it. The silence that followed was so deep, I swear I could hear a bird land on the roof. You bought the house? Dad asked, his voice cracking in disbelief. I did. But, why? Courtney croaked. Why would you do this? That's when I pulled the letter from my bag. One sheet, single-spaced, typed in the clearest, coldest tone I could manage. I thought about saying a lot of things today, I began. But I realized none of them matter as much as this. I handed the letter to my mother. She hesitated, then took it. Her hands were trembling. I won't scream. I won't argue. But you deserve to hear what I have to say once. She opened the page. Her lips moved as she read, but no sound came out. Then she passed it to Dad, who passed it to Josh. The letter read. You chose greed over family. You knew what Grandma wanted. You saw what I gave up to care for her. And still, you erased me. Lied. Stole. And justified it by calling me just a teacher. So here's your consequence. This house isn't for sale. It's not for rent. I'm not flipping it or living in it. I'm turning it into a community library and retreat center. 4 teachers. 4 kids. For caretakers like me. 4 people Grandma would have wanted it to serve. No one spoke. I think the weight of it finally sank in. Josh's face crumpled. You're doing this just to spite us? I shook my head. I'm doing it because she deserved better. And so did I. Mom looked like she wanted to say something. 1,000 words sitting behind her teeth. But all she managed was, "You're not the person I thought you were." "No," I said, stepping down from the porch. "I'm finally not." I turned, walked back to my car, and didn't look back. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Victorious. Maybe even a little smug. But driving away from that house, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror, I didn't feel any of that. I just felt quiet. Not empty. Not sad. Just a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. I didn't go back to my apartment. Instead, I drove to a local diner Grandma used to love, the one with the floral curtains and sticky vinyl booths. I ordered her favorite, grilled cheese with tomato soup and a side of pickles. I sat there, alone, listening to the buzz of the ceiling fan and the clink of spoons on ceramic, and finally let myself cry. It wasn't about the house, really. It never had been. It was about what the house represented. Trust. Family. Love. The belief that if you gave enough, cared enough, someone would protect your place in the story. My family had proven that was a fantasy. But I'd also proven something to myself. I wasn't weak. I wasn't a doormat. And I wasn't just a teacher. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into transforming the house. I hired local contractors to finish the renovations properly, no more slapdash DIY projects from Josh. We preserved the charm, the crown moldings, the original hardwood floors, the antique fireplace mantels. But we added accessibility upgrades, community reading nooks, a small kitchen for workshops and potlucks. Word started spreading about the retreat center. Teachers from the district reached out, offering to help. Retired librarians donated shelves and old first edition books. Even a local nonprofit pledged a small grant after hearing what I was building. I didn't make any formal announcements. I didn't post about it online. But I knew people were talking. One morning, as we were unloading donated furniture into the main living room, a truck pulled up the gravel driveway. I tensed, half expecting drama, but it was just my dad, standing awkwardly beside his rusted pickup. He approached slowly, holding something in his hand. I met him halfway, wary. He didn't speak right away. Just handed me a small velvet pouch. I opened it. Inside was Grandma's locket, the one she'd worn every day since I was a child. The one I thought had been buried with her. "She made me promise to give it to you," he said quietly. "I didn't. I thought you'd forget about it." I said nothing. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added. "But I thought you should have it." Then he got back in his truck and drove off. I clutched that locket for a long time before slipping it around my neck. The next few months were a blur of progress. Painters, carpenters, volunteers, it felt like the house was breathing again. I kept one room untouched, Grandma's. I turned it into a quiet reading space, filled with her old quilts and rocking chair, as if she might still walk in one day and hum to herself. By summer, we had our first visitors. Teachers burned out from the school year, looking for rest. A group of young girls from a mentorship program came to read on the porch and write poetry in the garden. The house, her house, was alive in a new way. I never heard much from my family after that. Josh and Courtney moved to the city. My parents put their house on the market and relocated to a neighboring town. There were no apologies. No olive branches. And I didn't need them. Some wounds don't close. But they scab. They toughen. They remind you where you've been. And every time I walk through the front door of that house, I remember who I am. Who she saw in me. And why I never let them take it away. Fall came fast that year. The trees around the farmhouse blazed gold and rust, and the air took on that crisp, nostalgic chill that makes you crave coffee in silence. I found myself spending more and more time on the porch, curled in Grandma's old chair, wrapped in one of her quilts. Sometimes, people from town would drive by slowly, trying to catch a glimpse. Word had spread about the transformation, and the house had become something of a local legend. The teacher who turned her inheritance into something bigger. The quiet revenge. The library on the hill. I never confirmed or denied anything. Let them talk. One Saturday morning, I got an unexpected visitor. Courtney. She stepped out of a rideshare car in skinny jeans and a wool coat, her hair pulled back, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her. I met her at the base of the porch steps, unsure of what to expect. "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. "I just wanted to see it. One last time." I nodded once and stepped aside. She walked slowly around the porch, eyes scanning everything like she was seeing it through new eyes. She paused in front of the window where she and Josh had hung string lights during their engagement party. Her fingers brushed the frame. "You know," she said finally, "I told him not to do it. Told them all it wasn't right. But I didn't stop it either. And that makes me part of it." I stayed quiet. I was raised to believe that if something's not written down, it doesn't count. But you were written into this place in ways paper never could have captured. I looked at her then, really looked. For the first time, she didn't seem like a threat. Just another person trying to live with the choices they made. "Do you hate me?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I don't trust you." She nodded like she expected that. "Fair." Before she left, she took one last look at the house. "She'd be proud of what you've done here." After she left, I stood in the hallway for a long time, running my fingers along the wall where Grandma had once measured my height in pencil marks. That night, I reopened her recipe box. I hadn't touched it since she died. Inside was a folded scrap of paper I didn't recognize, tucked between the instructions for her famous lemon bars and carrot casserole. It was in her handwriting. "Ella, if you're reading this, I hope you held your ground. This house holds our story. Don't let them rewrite it. Love always, Grandma." I didn't cry. I smiled. The house was never meant to be a monument. It was meant to be used. Shared. It had stood through decades of storms, births, deaths, secrets, and now, through betrayal and rebirth. The next week, we hosted a teacher's retreat. 20 educators from across the county arrived with sleeping bags, potluck dishes, and armfuls of books. We shared stories late into the night, our laughter filling the old rooms like fresh paint. One of them, a retired art teacher named Linda, told me, "You know, this place feels like it remembers how to love people." I just nodded. It does. I never needed my family's apology. What I needed was to know I wasn't crazy for believing I belonged. And now, I had proof in walls, in wood, in words. The farmhouse stood. And so did I. The first winter in the new old farmhouse was both the hardest and the sweetest. Snow blanketed the fields, muting the outside world until the only sounds inside were laughter, turning pages, and the occasional echo of boots in the mudroom. We hosted our first holiday potluck for local teachers and students who didn't have anywhere else to go. People brought casseroles and stories. Someone played piano in the living room while children read picture books on braided rugs. I watched it all from the staircase, locket warm against my chest, and felt that rarest of things, belonging. Not long after, I got a letter in the mail, no return address, just neat block letters. I knew the handwriting immediately. My mother. It was only a paragraph. "Ella, you made your choice. We made ours. I hope, in time, you'll understand why we did what we did. I hope you can forgive us, but I know you don't owe us anything. I do wish you well. Take care of yourself. Mom." I folded the note and put it away, neither angry nor relieved. I didn't need closure from them. I'd already found it. Sometimes, pain doesn't vanish, it simply grows into a different shape. My family had shrunk to a distant idea, like a photograph you keep in a drawer. Every so often, I'd remember a childhood birthday, a fight over chores, the way Dad used to whistle on Sunday mornings. The memories didn't sting so much anymore. One day, a group of kids from the local elementary school came by for a field trip. Their teacher, my old colleague, Ms. Grant, hugged me in the entryway. "Ella, this place is incredible," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's exactly what we needed." The children ran through the halls, marveling at books and the old piano, whispering secrets in the sunroom. I saw myself in them, small, overlooked, finding magic in hidden corners. That afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the barn, I sat on the porch steps, sipping coffee, watching the lights flicker on inside. I could almost hear Grandma's voice, warm and proud. "You held your ground, Ella." I smiled at the memory and knew, finally, that I had honored her in the only way that mattered, not by holding on to what was lost, but by building something new from the ashes. The house was no longer a prize to be fought over. It was a haven, a place for stories, for second chances, for quiet, stubborn hope. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen.